Hello, and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Meller. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. And if you're a regular part of our community, welcome back. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Today, we're focusing a bit more on the human end of the lead. This episode is an invitation to soften, to listen, and to remember. I'm joined by the luminous Catherine Grist, a nutritionist and a somatic coach and health coach who beautifully weaves together the science of the body with the soul of personal growth. She truly is the health alchemist. Catherine guides people back into relationship with their own inner wisdom through food, nourishment, and the deep intelligence of the natural world. In our conversation, we explore food as so much more than proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. We talk about how what we eat is a mirror for how we care for ourselves and for our dogs at the deepest level. We dive into the alchemy of cooking, the energetics of nourishment, and the ways our relationships with food can reveal what our souls are craving. We also journey into the ancient cycles that surround us, the rhythms of life, death, and rebirth woven into every harvest, every season, every meal. And as we move through Scorpio season towards Samhain and the Day of the Dead, in the potent year of the snake, we explore how food can become an offering, a way to honor our ancestors, our animal companions, and the unseen threads that connect us all. This one is rich, layered, and deeply grounding. So brew yourself something warm, settle in with your dog by your side, and let's step into the sacred nourishment that's been waiting for you. And make sure you stick around through the outro where I'll share an exciting opportunity to nourish your dog, mind, body, and soul. You won't want to miss it. On that note, let's go. Hi, Catherine. Welcome to Mystic Dog Mama. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Alexia. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I am so excited to have this conversation with you. We have had some offline conversations back and forth about all things health and nutrition and alchemy and magic and all this good stuff. And I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for this. I can't wait to dive into.
It's true. We haven't known each other very long, but certainly had some amazing conversations. So I'm excited as well to share that further. Let's see.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things I'm really excited about is to kind of shift the focus a little bit to the human end of the lead today. At Mystic Dog Mama, we focus a lot on the dog, obviously, but there are some beautiful correlations with the topics that we're going to cover today, with how actually our dogs can serve as the kind of invitation for us, or perhaps your own health is serving as the invitation, and then you start to look at your dog's health through this lens. But this notion of nutrition and alchemy and actually shifting our focus from just looking at macros and micros and how many milligrams of zinc are in this food and all that kind of stuff into actually how do we understand nourishment for our dogs. And today we're going to be talking about ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I love that thread that goes between us because I'm looking often about looking into our relationship with food and how I love that term nourishment, how that means so much more than just nutrition in its most kind of scientific sense. And I loved meeting you and kind of thinking about how I interact with my dog and how he shows me things and how I work with his food and nutrition gives a message through into my own life and how I look after myself as well. And I think there's a synergistic thread between it. We're coming at things from slightly different angles, but there's a very clear message that joins us. So yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about the human side of it. I have less knowledge on dog nutrition, although I do have obviously my lovely dog.
I love it. And Bailey is very well fed, as we know. But yeah, I was wondering if you maybe wanted to start with, because I know as well that you refer to yourself as a health alchemist. And I love that focus. And I love the notion of alchemy within how we are talking about food and nutrition. And I don't think there's anything more alchemical than preparing and cooking food at the most basic of levels. And then even the way that our bodies are transforming that food beyond thinking of just fuel, but really thinking about how, we are what we eat, for example. We have those kinds of idioms in our culture that display that level of understanding that we know that there's true alchemy here. But your work goes so much further beyond that as well. And I wondered if you want to talk about how you got into nutrition and how alchemy started to play a role in the way that you're working with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a fairly recent rebrand to go out there as the health alchemist. When I first qualified in nutrition, I worked under the name Real Food Nutrition. So I've always had this kind of connection with real whole foods. Um, but it has changed over the years. So I've been practicing working one to one with people for 8, 9 years now. And I started to see a much, much bigger picture. So if we take it right back then to my experience with food and what got me into this, I think that's where you're sort of asking me to start. I didn't always, I've worked in this field now, as I said, for 8 or 9 years. I had a corporate job before. I was working in a completely different industry. Um, what brought me into nutrition was my own experience with it. And it started very much with that nutrition side of it, the food that I was eating and how that impacted my health. What I can see now, what I reflected on later, is actually a slightly bigger picture around that, which was much more to do with my own connection with food and my own connection with myself. So I first worked with actually a kinesiologist. So I was struggling kind of with my own health a bit, not in any major way, but just not feeling great, not feeling like I had a lot of energy, struggling with some digestive symptoms, things like that. And I saw a kinesiologist who'd been recommended through my family, actually. I'd seen what he'd done working with another family member, and I was very, very curious. So I worked with him and had amazing results. And that kind of sparked my interest into learning nutrition more, because a lot of what he did with me was really dietary changes. But I went down that sort of very scientific route then of wanting to study nutrition in its pure scientific form. I wanted to understand about the macronutrients, the micronutrients, all the biochemical pathways, how these feed in. Yes, at a personal level, because not everyone is the same. Recommended guidelines and numbers don't fit everyone. I already had that kind of side of it. Um, But I think the piece that I recognize later is actually what is kinesiology. I'd kind of ignored the entire energetic side of it because I didn't understand it. I wasn't familiar with it. I hadn't come across it particularly in my life growing up. So I was very kind of fixed on that nutrition, the reading the papers, understanding the science side of it. But what actually, and I hope I'm not insulting any kinesiologists as I say this, because I haven't studied this, but my understanding and my interpretation of it is it's really tapping into an innate knowing in the body for what it needs. So, whilst the nutrition advice that I got from him was very well grounded in kind of science, it was a good diet. He was also a channel between my own body, my own kind of higher self or innate knowledge to communicate what it is that I didn't want in my diet and what it is I wanted to get in or to have more of. And I didn't really recognize that piece until a lot further down the line. I think many people are recognizing that nutrition isn't a one size fits all process. I mean, you do it with the dogs as well. Like, there isn't the perfect diet for all dogs. they need different things. And that's the same with humans. And we need to bring in other factors like how much we sleep and how much we exercise and how we manage our stress and things like that. Um, but there's this other aspect that actually our bodies kind of know, and we have forgotten, like we've forgotten how to tap into that. You were saying previously about how sometimes letting dogs lead the way in what they want to eat is the best way forward. And I completely agree. And we as humans as well have that innate knowledge. We've just kind of forgotten it and we don't know how to listen to our bodies and we don't know how to hear it anymore. We were talking just before we started recording, weren't we, about this a little bit. And there was a study back a century ago. So, an American doctor called Dr. Clara Marie Davis, she was working with children who were kind of sick, various different illnesses and conditions, malnourished, but also considered fussy eaters in terms of what they would and wouldn't eat. And she had this idea that actually the children did know what what was good for them and what they should eat. So she started this study. She started with very young babies, so from sort of 6 to 11 months, I think it was. And rather than give them a prescribed diet of all the nutrients that they needed, they were offered a selection of foods and allowed to pick and choose how much they wanted to have of those foods, which ones. They were helped to eat. Obviously, they were very young. They were helped to eat it if they wanted that help. But it was very much led by them. And the results were really, really good. And the study extended then, I think, to about 6 years and then included a lot older children as well. But what they found in this research, which is, kind of unethical, I guess, for people to do it today, it would be lovely to replicate it, but there are some, I guess, some ethical considerations on doing that. What they found is these children did feed themselves, an optimally nutritious diet. So some of them had rickets, for example. They corrected those nutrient deficiencies themselves. They noticed that when those children had something like a cold, they naturally gravitated towards foods which were rich in vitamin C and other immune system supportive nutrients. And I think it's that aspect of our connection with the food that we're eating that we've lost in like how we live. Um, and it's a fine balance, absolutely, because there are other compounding factors that come into play now. Like back in the 1920s, people were eating whole foods. We didn't have ultra processed foods. We didn't get like bombarded with marketing and information that gets in the way and gets clouded. But I think it's fascinating that it's there. And as you said, I think dogs are a little bit more connected to that. They haven't got the same level of marketing. They might have the ultra processed foods. It'd be interesting to know your thoughts around how that interplays with what dogs choose to eat. But there seems to be that kind of more natural connection that they still have.
100%. And just to clarify too, for listeners that might not be aware of what kinesiology is, it's basically muscle testing, the way that you would see that played out. And I love that that was your gateway into bridging the science and the spirituality, arguably, because I think that innate wisdom that you're talking about, that innate intelligence, is tied to our spirit. And it was through kinesiology that a homeopath was doing that actually got me onto the path that I'm on with Lucky. He used me as a proxy doing muscle testing to better understand what was going on with his health concerns and to tap into that wisdom. And I was sort of, I mean, I've always been very open to this stuff, but I think that particular example for me collapsed my disbelief, my ability to even be in disbelief with it, because I saw that was the thing that worked. All of the different tests had come back inconclusive, or in particular, the big thing, the big change was we had done allergen tests for Lucky on different proteins, and he'd come back negative for allergies. And as I've talked about many times on the podcast, there's absolutely a physiological difference between true allergies and intolerances, and those allergy tests don't test for intolerances. They're testing for immune responses that are allergic reactions. Think like peanut allergy kind of reactions. And so I was left in a bit of a quagmire of like, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't figure out what this is. And it was through the kinesiology that the homeopath was doing that he came up with he has an intolerance to chicken. And as soon as I took that information, I was put in the position of what do I have to lose? Might as well try it, right? Pulled the chicken from his diet. Lo and behold, everything started to clear up. So
That's just brilliant.
just
Um,
brilliant. Exactly. So I completely then was on board with this is a way to move forward in terms of not just looking at the scientific, because I'm like you, I love the evidence-based approaches to things, and I love understanding the biochemistry, and all of that is important. And there's that other side of things that comes from that innate wisdom. And when you were talking about fussy kids. We have that same situation where we talk about fussy dogs, and my belief is that there are no fussy dogs. They are just communicating that they know, whether that's at a spiritual level, which I think it very much is, as well as it's their microbiome communicating for different needs. Like it's that synergy of the kind of 3D, 5D approaches to things. They are showing us what it is that they need. And I think that there's that invitation with dogs as what I refer to as a gateway species, that they are inviting us back into that wild part of ourselves, back into that innate knowing. And we'll often do it for our dogs. Many of our listeners do self-selection practices with their dogs, whether that be about foods or different herbs, essential oils, etc. They'll be practicing that with their dogs. But the true invitation is how do we then reflect that back onto us in order to rekindle that relationship with the innate knowing? Because like you said, we've not only been bombarded by marketing, but we have been hijacked by additives into processed foods that actually make it, they're chemically addictive.
yeah.
That, so it's overriding. And we do see that same thing, to answer your question, in the ultra processed dog food space too, right? There's this overriding of the kind of natural. But that's where I love bringing these kinds of conversations back into the space, offers us that kind of choice point to say, hold on a second, is this really right for me? And how do I tap back in a world that is so loud and noisy? How do I tap back in? And it might actually be that watching your dog is that vehicle for you to tap back into your own innate knowing.
Yeah, I love that. I think it speaks really to that science that we have. So you talked about allergy testing, but not necessarily picking up on intolerances. Within the nutrition world, there's quite a lot that goes around there. So we can do allergy testing, we can also do intolerance tests. But what I find is where someone's gut is disrupted, they will develop or they will react, they will develop antibodies to all of the foods nearly that they are eating because of that damage. So the science is really trying to understand a better way to identify that. And sometimes it can be helpful to run intolerance tests for people and see what's coming up if there's, we really can't find the information any other way. But I think we're really missing a piece because if we can tap into that individual's innate inner knowing, they will have the answer. And it's amazing how many times I start working with a client and they're like, right, I need to I want to work on this health condition, this symptom, X, Y, Z. I'm at the end of my tether. I will do literally anything, but I won't give up gluten, or I can't give up my Friday night glass of wine. And it's so telling that that one thing I know is going to be playing a big role. It's like their body's screaming it at them that they need to do that one thing. So it is there, and it is finding those ways, be it through something like kinesiology. I don't use, I'm not trained in kinesiology myself. I use different techniques to try and help people to reconnect with their body and understand those messages, which I think sometimes the way that I work is it's more spiritual and broader than specific, foods, for example. But yeah, it's trying to find the right way to bridge that gap because we've got something far more powerful than the science itself inside of us. So how do we bring that into the mix, and how do we, yeah, get people back connected with that side of them? And I don't want to sound like I don't do science at all now. I absolutely
Yeah.
do the same as you do. Yeah. And I think that, having a good understanding of what humans need, what an individual needs to eat is a fantastic place to start. What I found myself experiencing that is it really gives you a kind of a bandwidth, a bit of peace and quiet, of silence, of space within the lifestyles that we have, which are so hectic and busy and go, go, go that we can't listen to ourselves. It helps to clear out some toxins, get some of those key nutrients that are needed to help the body function. And from that space, we can then move on to some of the bigger things and start to make that really long lasting, deep shifting work for the long term.
Absolutely. No, I think they're completely intertwined. And it's even, you've talked about the body as a messenger, that symptoms that are coming up are, and we see this with the dogs too, it's indicative of a kind of imbalance. It's a crying out for something, for help to move something through. And I think oftentimes the physical symptoms that are showing up, and especially from my interest in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, where there is embedded within that philosophy of health, a direct connection between the physicality and emotions,
Hmm.
and that there's almost like a map that is provided when we start to see certain symptoms show up, that it can be telling us which organ system is sort of struggling with what's going on and which emotions are associated with that organ system. And those are the ones that we're being invited, or our dogs are being invited, or our dogs are reflecting to us that we need to look at, that we're being invited to really to witness and to alchemize. And then, as you're saying, but you still go in and you support that system on a physical level with the foods that are going to do that. But you also are invited to really go into how did that dysfunction within that system take place in the first place. And oftentimes it is that correlation with the deeper emotions that our body is holding on to. And that's part of the body's wisdom too, I think, is the fact that it does hold on to things in order to then represent them when we are perhaps in a better space to be able to process them. I wonder what your
Yeah.
thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's this whole metaphysical aspect of it. Any emotions that we have that we don't have the ability, the support, the tools to deal with in that moment will be stored. It's just a universal safety mechanism. So if situations come up, and you can label this trauma if you want to. People sometimes don't like to label things as trauma because they think trauma is, really big T things. Really, trauma is just that. It's emotions, situations, things that have come up, feelings that we have that we aren't able to deal with at that moment in time. And so we hold on to them, in the body. And I believe then that these symptoms that are coming up are a way of our body to communicate because we've lost that inner voice connection. So our bodies can't just say, hey, you need to deal with this. This is bothering me. I need to feel this out, whatever. I need to feel out this anger or this shame or this sadness or whatever it is. If you're not listening, then it's got to find another way to get you to listen. And I think oftentimes we get these niggly symptoms, niggly feelings in the body, and we just keep pushing it down. We keep pushing it down. We keep pushing it down. And it starts to scream louder and louder and louder and louder until you can't ignore it. And that's when you've got full-blown symptoms. And yes, we work on that with the physical things, the nutrition, the sleep, the stress management, the outlets. But if we can also listen to that emotion, work through that trauma, allow it to be moved and felt and healed, then we find we come out on the other side. And for some people, that might be a stretch too far. For me, it's just my truth. It's something I've been through myself, and it's completely true. So yes, we got to work on those side of things. I sometimes think as well, the body's really clever in how it communicates things. So maybe you have a bad back. Okay, why do you have a bad back? Well, you might have been doing too much physically or had an accident. But also, are you just carrying a really heavy load? Is your body fed up with it? For me, I had some issues with my throat, a little bit of my thyroid, all here. I wasn't speaking my truth. I wasn't expressing myself. And so once I worked through some of these things, it's become better. I'm not saying I'm completely cured of everything, but it's become easier, it's become lighter. I'd be able to make the same steps. And so sometimes thinking about that, and when I'm working with people, I often picture that. When I started to add this into my work, I didn't tell my clients what I was doing. I would just map out using my functional medicine map, the normal way, and look at all of the nutritions and the lifestyle factors. And then I would have a separate, like a little secret sheet where I just kind of map the symptoms. And I could see, oh, you know what? That's really manifested here in their heart chakra. You know, what does that mean? That's all about love and grief. Or, you know, this is manifested, you know, they've got a lot of problems with their legs. Okay, well, that's kind of a root chakra. And actually, they don't have that grounded energy. Can we add in some grounding energy as well to help support that? And I sort of had to do it as an experiment myself with these little secret sheets. And then I was like, you know what? They're not lying. I've just done 3 sessions with this person and we've come right back round to what I had on that sheet in the first place. So let's go with it. Let's bring it in. Let's move it forward. Let's just have some faith. Let's just speak the truth and actually help people because that's ultimately what I want to do, share that message and help people.
Well, and oftentimes that's the missing piece that if they've gone the traditional route of trying to solve the symptoms, that's often the missing piece that they really need to address. And to coming to you or somebody who practices in a similar way that's truly taking a holistic perspective on things, that is where the healing can take place. I love that you have a secret sheet. I don't have a secret sheet, but I do in terms of I find it's so ironic or perhaps not ironic that when I'm working with clients and they're talking about the various things that are going on with their dogs, I would say like 99% of the time, something will come out in the conversation where you find out that the guardian either has the same problem or a very similar problem themselves. And this isn't to place blame. This isn't about transferring dis-ease onto your dog or anything like that. But I'm a firm believer that our dogs come into our lives in order to help us with our own evolution. And oftentimes we will attract a dog that has either similar conditions physically or, like I was saying, in terms of the relationship with Chinese medicine. It might not be like in my case, Lucky came to me with kidney issues. I didn't have kidney issues, but the kidneys are the house of fear. And I definitely had fear issues going on. So, with him presenting through the kidney, it was that invitation of not so much what's going on with my kidneys, although sometimes I do see that kind of correlation between dogs and guardians, but it's more what are those emotions that are coming up? And then the fear that I had around supporting him and having to come into a level of surrender and acceptance and opening with his healing journey in order to facilitate my own healing journey. So I think there's this beautiful synergy that goes on between us and our dogs, but also the physical and the spiritual and the emotional that allows us to surrender. If we choose to do that, it's an invitation. It's always an invitation. If we choose to surrender into the experience and witness what is being presented as a gift for our own growth with all of this.
Yeah, that resonates so much as well. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say I don't have a secret sheet
No.
anymore. It's a very open sheet now. Just that it started a little bit secretly while I tested it out and built my confidence, I guess, and built my faith in it as well. Um, but yes, that completely resonates with me, and I noticed as well, like it is with our pets, for example, but it's also with the people that I meet. And I feel really privileged to work in this field because I do work with so many different clients with so many different things. one thing I can take away from it though is that kind of reflection. I'll suddenly be seeing a lot of clients coming along with similar issues. And it's amazing that gift for me as well to sit back and go, well, I'm not having any problems with my joints, but suddenly I've got a lot of people who are coming to me with issues with their joints. I'm going to do that reflection on myself as well. Like, what's that showing me from maybe an energetic perspective about myself? And how can I take that information? So there's a little bit of
Mhm.
a give and receive, which is really beautiful, I think. But I think that talks very much to what you were saying with Lucky and the kidney issues and how that fear, that was the message, that gave you the message to dig a bit deeper, to be a little bit more curious, a bit more open, maybe a little bit more vulnerable, but to go into that fear and to help to heal that and resolve it and, come through it. And hopefully Lucky came through as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And tied into that as well was, to reiterate what you were talking about in terms of you still feed foods that are going to support that system. So it was the invitation to then feed specific foods to him that were going to support his kidneys. And he has come out the other side of it, but that we have both grown immensely. And I've also seen that other mirroring with as I have dealt with my fears. And he also, in addition to having the health challenges, was a very reactive dog. And so that's fear. That's the kidney being out of balance, right? That sort of fear aggression coming out in him. The more I have dealt with, and by dealing with, I mean witnessing and not trying to get rid of, but more of an integration of the different fears, the acknowledging of the fears and feeling it, allowing myself to feel it and not just shove it down. The more I have intentionally practiced doing that, I have seen a direct correlation in a reduction of his reactivity. I wouldn't actually label him as a reactive dog at this point.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. I'm curious then, if I can ask you a question.
Sure.
So, feeding Lucky the foods to support his kidneys, you've talked about the fear in yourself. Did it also change your relationship with food? Were you then looking at foods that are supportive of the kidneys, not just for dogs, but for humans, and seeing that in your own diet and using that yourself?
I was. And I also I feed Lucky in a way where it's like we are in an ecosystem. I don't think of dog food and human food. Food is food. And so I'm fortunate that he's small as well, so this makes it a lot easier to do. But for example, we will share foods. I'll buy in, a particular protein. For example, he gets some, I get some, kind of thing. But and the foods that are good for dogs' kidneys, I'm borrowing that from traditional Chinese medicine. That is just, they're the same foods that are good for human kidneys. So things that are, in this particular instance, that are at the start of life, eggs, for example, seeds, nuts, black sesame seeds in particular, hydrating foods because the kidneys rely on hydration. So looking at even things like bone broth, the kidneys are tied to the bones in traditional Chinese medicine. So I would make him bone, I still do this, make him some bone broth, and I have the bone broth too.
Mm.
And but there's an intentionality behind it as well of nourishing me as well as I'm nourishing him because we've talked about this before and I've mentioned it on the podcast of I really, really take umbrage with the hashtag that I see on Instagram all the time of hashtag my dog eats better than me. Like that's not something to be proud of. It's not something we should be striving for. We deserve that love and attention and care as much as our dogs do. And so the way that I put it into practice is very much about how I'm shopping for one another. And of course, I'm not necessarily a massive fan of all of the organ meat that he gets, although I do eat that because I recognize that, especially going through perimenopause, I have found that eating some beef liver does make me feel better. So I am aware that my body is in need of some of those things as well. But I think it's that perspective of I've put an energy around how I am feeding us and that this is a caring for both of us and a nourishing of both of us. And then I tweak things according to if he's got any particular health stuff going on or I've got any particular health stuff going on, add a little bit more. Because again, like you were saying, there's no one right way to eat for a human. There's no one right way to eat for a dog. And obviously his needs are going to be slightly different from my needs because we're different species. But there are correlations, and as much as I can, I foster that. Yeah.
No, and I love that. And it's that intentionality, I think, was what I wanted to draw out from you or see if there was the
Mm,
connection there, because I think we've been also so disconnected from that relationship we have with food.
yeah.
So we have food as fuel, but we use food in so many other ways. Like we were talking about celebrations, right? And how we use different foods in different ways socially in celebration. The science is catching up again now, so I'm fascinated to dive into like quantum scientific research and things now. So there's one side where like wild foods, organic foods, they contain more kind of light biophotons. They're just more energetically alive and good for us. But what's also been found is that kind of intentionality, that consciousness. When we take the time to think about the food we're eating with intention, because it's going to support us in a certain way, or because it tastes delicious, because we're creating this beautiful meal for ourselves and for others or our pets, when we really believe that that food is good for us, it's even better for us. And I'm not saying you can, go and get your fast food and then just really believe it's good for you, because I think you can't trick yourself at that level. But if you really believe the food is good for you, it works out better. And I
Yeah.
think that whole connection is another piece of the puzzle. And we live in this society which is very fast paced, and nutrition is very much hammered as fuel, nutrients. Biohacking is another term, which hashtag biohacking is, is on mine. It's like these are natural processes that can support us. We can't take the shortcuts, because actually the time and energy that we put into cooking a food raises its vibration. It helps to support us at that spiritual, emotional level in a way that, grabbing a ready meal, even if it's like nutritionally perfect, organic, just wang it in the oven or the microwave. No, like if
Right.
we can actually take the time, we don't even need to have really as good quality ingredients sometimes. We're taking the time to cook and build that connection. It really nourishes us. So that's what I was kind of getting at and where I wanted to speak to a little.
100%. Oh, I fully support that. And I also, um, I believe in the power of prayer within that too, of the practice of praying over our food, not coming from a religious context, but from a spiritual context, a context and an honoring. And you see the work of like Dr. Emoto and now Veda Austin, who's taken it forward with water and water as holding consciousness, right? So I have on Lucky's water bowl a little piece of tape and I write love on it. And I also underneath his water bowl, I have a piece of paper where I write love and perfect health. And I set that blessing every single day. Do I have all of the latest purified blah, blah, blah water? No, I don't. I have tap water that I boil, let the chlorine rise off. And, I'm aware there are other things in there, right? But I'm not buying into the fear of all of that. I'm setting the intention that this is going to nourish him. I do that for his food when I'm cooking it, when I'm plating it up, when I serve it to him, when I do my own food. So, but I didn't used to do this for me. I started with doing it for him. And I recognized that the urge to do it came from a desire to fix.
Hmm.
That was my big thing. I need to fix him and make him healthy. And that was part of my shadow work. And it's kind of perfect. We're talking about shadow stuff. As we mentioned, we're like in Scorpio season now, and all this crap is going to surface, right? Like for you to look at. But there's the beauty. It's the death and rebirth cycle. And it's that opportunity to look at the dark. And the dark goddesses are all around us in mythology and in kind of different cultural contexts as a way to support that transformation. And being in the year of the snake, too, I think also adds to what we're going through right now. That was one of my big shadow things, my big wound that I had to look at is I was doing all of the stuff on the surface looked good. I was doing all the like measuring of the micros and the macros, and I was doing all this good stuff and blah, 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 but it all was coming from fear. That was the underlying thing that I was being asked to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably an ongoing thing for me because I think it's I'm much better with it, but I think it's healing is often like we refer to it like an onion where you're peeling back the layers. And I'm just witnessing it where it will crop up, but I'm not as reactive as I used to be. Hence why he's not as reactive as he used to be. So there's that invitation of can I be okay with what is? Being really in presence and acceptance with what is as well. And that's been a massive gift that the whole preparation of food and looking at diet. And again, I came at it at first, my journey started on the dog end of the lead, but it has traveled up the other way around where I'm really being asked to do that for myself. And some people will start for themselves and then they do that reverse process and they start to look for their dogs. But it has been such a massive gift to shift that idea from food and control, which actually, and this is something I want to kind of bring things to as well with the work that you're doing. I recognize that as a pattern throughout my life that I had an emotional connection to food that was all about control. And I've shared openly on the podcast previously that as a teenager, I suffered quite badly with eating disorders. And that was my way of trying to control, trying to fix. And it became such a direct association with food that for many years afterward, I had a very poisoned relationship with food. And
Yeah.
I think as humans, that's something that we do that's different to dogs, obviously, that we add that other layer of emotional, direct emotional correspondences to food. And I know that that's part of what you support people with as well, is sort of looking at those kinds of correspondences that we've created personally and culturally.
Yeah, no, I am very, very interested in our relationships with food. So I've talked a little bit about that kind of intentionality in looking at food, but it is that I also spoke about food as a celebration and what that means. But I don't think anyone is completely separated from the relational aspect they have with food in some way, shape, or form. So that's really eloquently put how you've worked through this and understood food as a control method of control for you when maybe other things in your life are out of control. You could come into that. And I think sometimes that's what the whole, counting calories or nutrients or all of these things, that's a way of control. So for other people, there may be elements of, you know, fear within there. There may be elements of comfort. Food means so many different things. And yeah, I'm actually doing some advanced training now in eating disorders, both from a nutrition and a psychological perspective. It's not particularly that I want to bring, you know, diagnosed eating disorders into what I'm doing, work with people who are specifically, at their end of the scale. I wouldn't turn them away once I'm qualified, but it is getting a deeper knowledge and understanding of how that plays a role and how we start to, first of all, like you said, recognize, oh, we do have a relationship with food. And it might be something relatively simple, like you might, when you're feeling sad, turn to eating chocolate. I mean, I could probably be quite personal on this one. I feel like chocolate makes me feel better, or sweets, or well, why is that? And yes, there is sugar, and there's a dopamine hit coming out of that. But I have I have memories from childhood of sitting with my grandmother, and she always had the sweets, and it was like a fun thing that we did together. And so in a way, I also get her love reminded to me when I comfort myself in that way. And that's great. But it's about then finding that balance around, well, how is that supporting my physical body, and to what degree do I partake in that? I would never stop eating chocolate, but trying to balance it out and then start to think, okay, well, what actually am I missing in this moment, and how else can I bring that and recognize that and bring that kind of love and acceptance to myself that I would have felt through there, so that I can do it in a way that's a little bit more physically healthy to my body. And I just think I think everyone has something, and it may not even be food, it's not necessarily food. It could be training, or it could be the other different activities that people engage in, that's bringing them something else, that's kind of soothing those emotions deep inside of us, rather than allowing them to be felt. And yeah, letting go a little bit of that control side of things.
Mhm. I love that. I see this transference that we often do as well onto our pets, and there's a lot of conversation right now in the dog space about the development of Ozempic type drugs for pet obesity, because obesity in animals is rampant, and we know it's the same as with humans, the kinds of chronic disease states that can create. And I think one of the things that isn't necessarily being talked about as much in the dog space that I think is really tied into our own human dealings with this, well, one is dogs do not feed themselves. Like, they don't have opposable thumbs. They cannot open the cupboards and the fridge, like they can't access the food themselves. And I'm not downplaying, like, some dogs have a genetic issue, for example, but that's really the minority. It's often that we are feeding them species inappropriate diets. So we're talking like ultra processed, high carb diets. I've reiterated on the podcast before that dogs don't have a biological need for carbohydrates, and yet the norm is to feed them food that is 60, 70% carbs, and that just lays on the fat. But it's also that we love to do these human things that are very much like what you were describing of sitting with your grandmother and having some sweets, and that being about a loving thing, that we like to show our love by feeding our dogs or engaging them in more humanized activities like pup cups, that kind of a thing. And there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, in moderation, like on occasion. But I think what's happened is that we have anthropomorphized our dogs as an extension of our kind of unconscious need and desire, on many respects, to deal with those emotions, to deal with either not feeling loved, for example. And now we have this being that we love so much, and we're pushing all of our things onto them, and not necessarily realizing that, and not necessarily realizing, like, yes, food is a love language, but it can be used inappropriately with our pets too. And so when we have an obese pet, again, this isn't about blame and judgment, but this is an invitation to look at what is going on with me, as well as how do I deal with the health of my animal.
Yeah,
It's
that's so. I like that explanation. I've never really thought of it that way around before, I guess. I'm often thinking about my own relationship with, with food, or how I feed myself, how I look after myself. That's a wider nourishment thing as well. But yeah, it is how we share that with other people, with our pets. And it creates a vibration, doesn't it? It
mhm,
creates an energetic vibration. So it stands to reason then that our pets will pick up on that if we're in that, if we're in that vibration, that it's going to affect everybody, and not just the root cause where it's, from where it's coming from.
mhm. There is such a vibration with food. And we were just talking before we started recording that, this week in particular in Mexican culture it's the start of the Day of the Dead festivities. And there is a practice of the belief that the veil between the spirit and the physical world is thinner, and we invite our loved ones, humans, pets, etc., back using food, using the smells of their favorite food. We invite them back to us. and we spend a few days with them and we celebrate together and we have this party together and a way of demonstrating that we're still all connected. And I love that these altars that are created with the foods are called ofrendas, offerings. And I've been reflecting myself about food as offering to our health, as offering to our spirit, as offering, we were just talking about earlier, an offering to our microbiome that does all of the hard work for us and for our dogs as well to access, to create and access the nutrients that keep us alive. I think it's such a beautiful kind of physical practice of demonstrating that. And I wondered a little bit about your reflections on food as offering and how do we incorporate, going back to what we were talking about with ceremony as well, how can we incorporate more ceremony into our everyday relationship with food in order to honor that beautiful connection that we have with it?
So my reflections on that are quite lovely, actually. It was really nice to think of food as an offering because to me, that says that that food has a value beyond, its micronutrient makeup. Like there's a value attached to that, which you are then sharing out with intention. So that food becomes so much more, but in a very, very positive way. And you said earlier as well about, the simple act of like saying grace or prayer before eating. Many religions do this, and I'm not saying that we all need to follow a specific religion, but I think it is actually a very beautiful practice that adds a lot of value without, I guess, like previously I wasn't really consciously aware of that, to take that moment before we eat to be thankful for the food, to recognize the value that it has is, I mean, it's magical, isn't it?
It's alchemy.
It is the alchemy of the food. It's very different to grabbing your ready meal and sitting in front of the TV and not looking at it. Like it's adding another layer, and I think it helps us to really connect into this bigger picture because when we're nourishing ourselves with the food, or we're nourishing others with the gift of food, or offering it to those that have gone before, it's really showing a level of care for each and every individual soul that's not there when we just put food in a little box that doesn't have any meaning. So it's a fine balance, isn't it? I guess that's my reflection. We can sometimes use food and our relationship with food in a less positive way, shall we say, or I don't like to use kind of black and white, negative,
Mhm.
positive, but like in a way that's pushing away those feelings and pushing away that connection. And we can use food and things that nourish us in a way that's very positive for that bigger, bigger picture. So I love ceremony, and I think we do many ceremonies anyway. One thing I often ask clients to do where I can see that they're very rushed, they're very busy, they're very stressed, is to start the day with a cup of tea intentionally. So, I mean, there's a serious problem if you can't find 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. It doesn't need to be longer than that. But if you can take 5 minutes to make your cup of tea, brew your cup of tea or coffee, if you're a coffee person, and then sit down, it's like a mini tea ceremony. Sit down, feel the warmth, smell the smells, be present in the moment, appreciate, I love a green tea and I'm thinking about all the lovely antioxidants that are in my green tea and what that's doing for my body and helping to support my body. Take that 5 minutes. That is a ceremony. If you're preparing food, if you're stood there chopping your onions, boiling your bone broth, you're taking, that's like a mini ceremony. That's connecting us. And we can do that each and every day, as well as those kind of big ceremonies. And I think it becomes easier then because we're showing that intentionality towards ourselves as well as the food, and kind of building, yeah, that connection.
I love that. And those are very simple things that people can do. It's you're doing your same thing that you would normally do, but you're bringing a level of awareness and presence to it that is so desperately needed in this
Mm.
world. I think as well, a practice to kind of add on to what you were just talking about that I do when I'm preparing Lucky's food in particular is an honoring of the animals that gave their lives for him to eat and for me to eat. And that includes not only the protein that I'm cutting up, but that's also all of the insects that were involved in the process and also honoring the people that were part of the harvesting of the food or the rearing of the food. And I think for me, that's part of connecting me back to the food system that we have been so disconnected from, and that honoring of the intricacies, the interweaving of life and death that we can't get away from as much as we wish that we could. We just can't. And so it's a way, we talked about this in our episode on having compassion when it comes to feeding carnivores and dealing with some of the different heavy feelings that brings up, but how there is that invitation to reconnect ourselves to the web of life and to show gratitude for the animals that have been involved with and the plants that have been involved, everyone who has been, all the beings, like you're saying, all the souls that have been part of that. And it goes for me beyond just a connection to that food. It's the reminder of we are all one, truly, truly, and to feel it, not just to intellectualize it. And it's so beautiful that something as simple and kind of like an everyday practice as feeding ourselves or feeding our dogs is that invitation if we choose to take it.
I love that. And one thing we haven't mentioned for the listeners is I am very British, but I live now in the north of Sweden, and it is quite a rural place. And something I love about being here is that I've grown that deeper connection with the food that I eat. So I try to incorporate as much natural, local food as I possibly can. So I'm out there picking my blueberries and picking my mushrooms and my herbs for the teas. And it's also with the meat. So, this week I had a delivery of reindeer meat. And some people might go, "Oh gosh, Rudolph, how you doing this?" But it's very interconnected with the life here. So I see the reindeer out, the Sami people raise them. I've had the privilege of going along and like helping to feed some reindeer at the end of season and understand a bit more about that. It's a culture, it's a way of life. And there is a lot of, yeah, reverence to that. There's a lot of appreciation. There's a lot of love that goes into that. And for me, reindeer meat is it's a sustainable food. It's not been flown for miles. It's pretty wild. I mean, they are essentially farmed, but they're farmed in a traditional way around natural landscapes. So I know it's a really good quality of food. I know that those animals had a good quality of life. I can see the whole picture of how that interplays as well with the lives of the people that raise them. And I think it's just such a beautiful celebration. We can't be so removed from that. One of the early days when we were here, my neighbor came with a piece of meat for me as a, I don't know, for thank you for something. And it was a piece of moose meat. And she's a hunter. And she could tell me what moose that came from, when she shot it, where she was. And there's a thanks and there's a gratitude in that, which is absolutely beautiful. And we can't disconnect. I think that's so, such an issue for people eating today is that we can be so disconnected by not seeing the foods and where they're coming from. And actually, it's a really important part that reminds us we are all a part of this. We are all connected, as you say. And to be able to appreciate that is also a huge deal, I think, for our collective evolution through this.
Absolutely. Now's probably a good time since you've mentioned being in Sweden. You have a beautiful retreat coming up that people can take advantage of. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how people can learn more?
Yeah, thank you. I would love to. So food is a part of my retreat and helping people to connect with it. So I live geographically in the center of Sweden, but it sort of gets classed as northern Sweden. We have lovely seasons here, and I am running a retreat in January, which will be midwinter. It will be very cold and it will be very snowy. And I'm running the retreat at an off-grid retreat center. So the retreat is really designed to reconnect us to nature, to natural foods, to the landscape around us. It's designed to help people come from very busy lifestyles into a place of quiet and calm and get back to those very kind of more basic human ways of existing. So we will be heating with wood fires, we will be cooking on a wood fire. We have an amazing sauna which is wood fired. We're not surrounded by lots of, electricity and all of the rest of it. I mean, there is a generator, there's a backup. We're not entirely cut off. We do have warm showers. But the idea is that sometimes we need to force a break to be able to reconnect with that inner voice. And that might be about the way that we look after ourselves with food, but it might be about something entirely different. I know coming from London that I was just running, running, running the whole time. I was working, I was raising children, I was juggling schedules. I was using food as we've got to get the nutrients into the kids. What's this recipe? Let's batch it, let's freeze it, let's get it out in a hurry. I was running around trying to socialize, but not in an intentional way. And I think we sometimes, and particularly if we get to maybe this kind of midlife sort of stage, that we need to kind of take stock of things and we need to figure out, well, why are our bodies screaming at us with fatigue and headaches or joint aches or perimenopausal symptoms? Take a break and just kind of find that calm, that space to reconnect with those more basic things. Start to be intentional with how we eat, how we walk. We'll be walking through the forest, probably with snowshoes, just looking around, appreciating how beautiful it is, the peace, the quiet, seeing the animals that are around there that are living naturally. So yeah, so the retreat is called Unplug to Recharge, and I'm running it in January, and I'm very, very excited about it. I absolutely love doing this. I love the break it takes from my own little busy world as well to help me have a little restock. So that is the upcoming retreat, and then
Amazing. What are the
there'll be
dates in January?
it's from the 19th to the 26th of January.
And how can people find out more to ask you questions or to sign up directly? What's a good place to send them to?
Yeah, you can go to my website. We didn't even say my name at the beginning, I don't think. I'm sure I'll put that on there. So I am Catherine Grist. So you can go to catherinegrist.com and all the details there, or you can find me on the social media channel. So I am the_health_alchemist on Instagram. That's probably the best place to start if you're an Instagrammer. I'm sure you'll put some links on there
I will
in
put all those links in the show
the
notes.
notes. Yeah, as well. But yes, so the details are on there. I still have a few places left on the retreat. I will only be taking 8 people at a time. It's a small setting, and I think it's important that we have that kind of limited amount of people so that we can really connect and we can really make the most of it. But there are still some spaces left, and if anyone feels called to join, I would love to have you there. And you're welcome to reach out and have a chat with me if you've never come across me before and you want to ask any specific questions. You would just need to get yourself to Östersund in Sweden, and then we pick up from there and drive out to the off-grid retreat centre. and then everything else is included, all the activities, all the food, the accommodation. There will be an option as well to take an ice bath if anyone would like to do that.
Mm.
And I really hope people will, because it's quite a fantastic thing to experience out in nature.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. And like we said, I'll leave all the links in the show notes so you can contact Catherine directly with any questions that you might have and how to book. I could literally talk to you forever, I think.
We're definitely going to have some more conversations, I
I
think.
agree. I agree. Is there anything for this conversation that we've not touched upon that you want to make sure that we let listeners in on?
I can't really think of anything now. I think, as you said, we've lots of conversations. I'm sure we can pick up and have another conversation at some point. But I'm just really grateful that I could speak today and speak to your listeners and introduce myself to a few new people. As I said, the retreat is coming up, and I would love to see some new people there. The details on my website are there as well if you would like to work with me one to one. So I do work with people one to one online. And there's a few more exciting things coming up. So if you want to join my newsletter from there, I send out a monthly newsletter, then you can keep on top of that. There will be a group program coming and a few other exciting things in the pipeline for next year, because this is our 9 year, this is our snake year, this is our transformation. Ready for next spring. So I'll be going into hibernation shortly for the winter months.
Absolutely. Well, as we should. Seasonally, that's what we're supposed to do. And the new year doesn't actually start until the spring. And I'm adamant about being a proponent of that.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I wanted to do the retreat in January, because I want people to be in that energy of kind of rest and reconnect ahead of the spring rather than that it's the 1st of January, let's go, go, go. No, we're gonna take a little bit longer. We're going to just calm it down and we're going to sit in that and use the energies. We are natural, we are natural animals as well. We're part of this natural world, and we're all interconnected with it. So use that energy to our advantage, sink into it,
Absolutely.
surrender, and let it all unfold.
Surrender. I love it. I have one last question for you before we close, and it's a question I ask all of my guests. And you have your beautiful dog, Bailey, and I wonder if you want to reflect using him or other animals, or I'll even expand it out to food if you feel like that's a more appropriate vehicle for answering this question today. But generally, I would ask you, what do you feel like Bailey has taught you about what it means to be human?
Oh, I love this question. I'm going to use it with Bailey. Bailey has taught me so much. But Bailey has, he came into my life at a time that was quite difficult for me. And he taught me how to take a step back to get back to those natural things, walking in the forests, playing, inviting that play and that joy back into my life. And I think that is the biggest thing he taught me about being human, being an animal, is that we need those things. We need that outdoors time, that space, and that play.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being my guest today. Thank you for your energy and your wisdom and your presence. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for joining me for my conversation with Catherine Grist. If you would like to learn more about working with her one-on-one, or if you'd like to learn more about her magical retreat happening in January 2026 in Sweden, please visit her website, catherinegrist.com, or follow her on Instagram at the_health_alchemist. I've left these links in the show notes. And if you've been curious about cooking fresh food for your dog but don't know where to start, I would love to invite you to join me for a brand new live cook-along workshop happening November 29th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. UK time on Zoom. It's a small group experience, no more than 8 dog guardians, so you'll get plenty of support. You'll learn how to make simple, nourishing, raw, or gently cooked meals with confidence, and you'll leave feeling excited to feed your dog fresh food that they're gonna love. The beta price for this experience is just £39. If you want to learn more, drop me an email at hello@learnfetch.com and I'll send you the information. I've left all of this in the show notes too. All right, until next time.